Happy New Year. Hi, everyone. Welcome. It's the very first Resistance Live of 2024. I once again am in my moment of like, I can't even believe we're here. And that means it's an election year. So I hope everybody's ready. I'm really tired. I feel like this whole holiday season is like taking me out. I'm sure a lot of you people feel that way as well. But I'm nonetheless very grateful that you're here. As always, it's Resistance Live. I'm ECM, and I'm coming to you from occupied Tongva territory here in Southern California. Today, for our visually challenged viewers, I am wearing my brown sweater over top of a cream-colored shell. I have my big hoop earrings in. I am a pink-skinned, green-eyed, dirty, blonde-haired woman. I'm in my office in front of a plant and a chair and a lamp and everything else. And I am, as always, using she, her pronouns. Thank you for being here. Okay, so we're here. And those of you who were with me yesterday on our Patreon-only Sunday Progressive Coffee Hour know that I made some predictions about 2024. I'm not going to kind of like repeat them here today. You know, you can go become a Patreon subscriber if you want to see what I had to say about that. In addition to our massive 2023 roundup, which was quite a labor of love. But one of the things that I do just want to mention here is that we can't take our eyes off the ball, that there is a very strong likelihood that we are in the year where Trump will finally be convicted of a crime. And I think that in light of every conversation that happens in relation to the 2024 election, we can't forget that fact. One of the things that I was thinking about this morning as I was getting ready for the broadcast was that it's very easy right now, I think, for a lot of folks to get swept up in a given thing in the news cycle and get sort of like squirreled, you know, to quote up, off the actual path of what we're facing and what we're facing down. I want everyone to be very, very clear as we head into this election year that the likelihood of him being in prison before November of 2024 is extremely high. Now, I've said this many, many times, you never know with litigation how things are going to go. But all that said, I think that we've got to keep in mind that there is at bare minimum like a better than 50% shot that he's going to be convicted well in advance of the Republican National Convention, if not by November. And so folks need to be like, yes, hello, Rachel Sallow from Charlotte, North Carolina, my favorite Indivisible organizer, aside from Leah Greenberg, who, by the way, is in our new program, is in the house. I'm going to remind you all that like this is a year to mobilize like your life depends on it and the lives of people that you care about depend on it, but also to have a really clear viewfinder in terms of like where we are likely to be come November. All right. And so one of the things that I want people to be like super, super clear on is that there is no option to not be involved this year. Now, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I have to say for all the keyboard warriors out there who've still not written a postcard and aren't like lining up to canvas and haven't figured out how they're going to get involved, like now is your time to actually do that, because we really do need to make sure that everyone is committed to doing something to mobilize for 2024. Like we're mere days away from the first round of primaries right now, you guys. So I want everybody to be like super, super clear on the requirements for this year of engagement. And my other statement about this also is to please remember in those moments where you're feeling helpless and hopeless and where you're feeling like there's no point to all of this, or you've gone and read something that Donald Trump has posted on Truth Social and you're like, how the hell are we here? To remember that there are gears moving in the background all the time inside our legal system right now that are going to have tremendous and transformative impact on this election. We've never seen an election cycle like this. It's going to be completely different from anything that any of us have ever experienced. And I think one of the strategies that we also have to adopt here is to remember that a lot of us are still really traumatized from 2016 and the events that came right after the 2020 election. We have to remember that we're in a very different environment here now. And one of the things that means is that we've also got to really endorse the upholding of the rule of law, because that's one of the things that's going to get us through all of this while we are organizing as if Trump is going to be the nominee. And that is my best kickoff advice as we start the 2024 election cycle. Okay. I want to make a few other things clear here. we're going to have some decisions within the next couple of weeks that are going to determine the lay of the land for the 2024 election from a legal perspective very, very, very quickly. Okay. While we were all on break, over the weekend, Jack Smith filed his opposition brief in the DC Circuit on the issue of presidential immunity. It's an incredibly plain language brief. Like, I would actually encourage those of you who maybe are not lawyers here, but who are interested to actually go and read it, because it's very easily accessible to the layperson, incredibly well drafted, very compelling, but it makes some really critical points here, which is that if Trump were to win on presidential immunity, like, Joe Biden could shoot people from the White House and never be prosecuted for it. He could seize power and never leave and could never be prosecuted for it. I sit with folks like Joyce Vance and Neil Katyal and others that, notwithstanding all of our disappointment with the current Supreme Court, I think it is extremely unlikely that we are going to see a majority rule that Trump is immune from prosecution as a result of the events of January 6th or anything else. In fact, I think we're going to have a determination by the DC Circuit on this by the end of next week. I have to point out that the oral argument in this immunity issue in front of the DC Circuit is a week from today. I would not be surprised to have a written order from them within a few days of that oral argument. And then we're teed up again for the Supreme Court. And I'm going to tell you, I'm not pessimistic at the moment about how the Supreme Court is going to rule on this. I'm also not alone in that. Like Joyce Vance said over the weekend that she thinks that we've got at least 5 votes to deny Trump presidential immunity, if not more, because fundamentally, if they rule in Trump's favor in this regard, it's kind of like the end of American democracy. So I know we've got some cynics in the crowd and some people who are pessimistic, and I'm not one to ordinarily be optimistic about this 6-3 conservative majority, but I have to say that there's a really serious basis here to assume that the Supreme Court is not going to rule in Trump's favor. And part of that has to do with the potential consequences to the GOP and the far right if they do. Right? So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this goes. I'm going to be really curious to see how this all plays out. But I have to tell you that I think we're going to have a better understanding within the next week or so of where this is all going to go in the context of at least the presidential immunity determination, and probably with regard to the ballot initiatives that are underway in the states. So I have to point something out to everybody. We have had these determinations out of Maine and Colorado now that Trump will not be on the primary ballot. The Colorado GOP has appealed the Colorado Supreme Court's decision to the Supreme Court of the United States. We're going to see this 14th Amendment issue teed up very shortly in front of SCOTUS as well. All right. And that's leaving aside the fact that we still have 14 other states right now that have proceedings underway from voters or organizations to try to keep Trump off the ballot. The litigation in those states is not anywhere near complete yet. And so we've got a progression here happening in the direction of not just the issue of the 14th Amendment and whether or not Trump is actually qualified to be on the ballot again, which will be decided by the Supreme Court one way or another. Even if the Supreme Court rejects review, that will mean that the Colorado determination stands, and then we'll have to see what happens in the other states, okay? But we're also going to see a determination on presidential immunity very, very quickly, and that is going to make all the difference in the world in terms of things like the trial schedule. So how the Supreme Court rules on presidential immunity is going to impact the trial schedule in Judge Chutkan's courtroom. Reminder, we've got a March 4th trial date that's holding firm there right now. That's like 60 days from now, folks. So things are going very, very quickly, honestly. I know a lot of people think the wheels of justice turn slowly, but right now it feels like they're moving very fast. And the determinations from these various moving parts are going to have a major impact on the 2024 election. So I want people to be, big picture, but also small picture. So I'm going to give you guys, one thing that I want you all to do today. And I basically want to ask everyone here to do this like once a month between now and November. Please go check your voter registration. We're in a year again, this happened last year also in Texas and other places. We're in a year again where there's going to be an effort to engage in a whole variety of voter suppression tactics, including purging people from voting rolls. Very, very important right now that you check your voter registration status and that you do it continuously throughout 2024. We do not want people to be wiped from the wiped from the voter rolls because you've moved, or you were inactive in the midterms, or for some other godforsaken reason, you live in a predominantly Black district. This is one thing that people have engaged in, states have engaged in terms of wiping voter rolls without any explanation. And while these things are being challenged in court, the most effective preventative for this impacting your ability to vote is to take responsibility for your own voter registration. So please make sure you do that today. This is a really good thing to do at the start of the year, just like booking your annual physical. It's a good time to go check your voter registration. All right. I also want people to be aware that there are going to be issues with mail-in voting this year. Okay. Some people are going to get your ballots only in the mail. That's what happens in California. I mean, yes, you can vote in person, but it's very complicated. Very important to grasp right now what the mail-in ballot voting requirements are in your state. And one of the things that I want to encourage people to do here as well is look up the deadlines for voting where you live, okay? When is your primary ballot due? When is your general election ballot due? Okay. What's the turnaround time that's expected on your ballot? Does your state allow for ballot tracking? Okay. Now is a really good time to start looking at when your primary voting is going to take place. Like, yes, New Hampshire, for instance, votes in 3 weeks. The Ohio GOP just moved their caucus, to the 15th of January, to Martin Luther King Day. Nobody should be shocked, but it's still surprising. They did it intentionally. Everybody should be aware of what is happening where you live, in the state where you live, and with the understanding that you need to calendar the deadlines for yourself of when you're going to vote. And that will also, by the way, help you to remind your neighbors and your friends and anyone else who you're speaking to about the 2024 election of the deadlines for them to get their ballots in. So those are my 2 suggestions for today. Okay. Go check your voter registration and get your deadlines calendared so that you know what's coming up. All right. I want to just talk, I've already mentioned this very briefly, but we do have this brief that was filed in the DC circuit on the issue of immunity. I want to just remind everybody as well that there was an amicus appeal brief that was granted also within the last few days, written by former GOP officials and lawyers, by conservative lawyers, by even Ty Cobb signed on to that one. And he was one of Donald Trump's former lawyers. I'm no fan of Ty Cobb. I've said that before, but I do want to point out that there is a big swell right now of support for the denial of presidential immunity on both sides of the fence. And that is also really critical. Reminder, again, it's really funny. I found myself in a discussion about this over the weekend also. I have to remind people that, there are strategies that you need to implement right now in terms of how we are building bridges and in some cases making strange bedfellows to save democracy in 2024. I'm going to say it again, if you have not yet read Anand Giridharadas' book, The Persuaders, it is mandatory reading for the 2024 election cycle. Part of the reason why is that it sets a very clear roadmap for how we have to work with people who we may not only agree with like 25% of the time to try to make sure that democracy is saved in 2024. And it's full of strategies to do that. The other thing that I'm just going to tell you guys, because this is my moment to do this on the broadcast, is you have a scant 8 days left to register for the program that we're running that starts on the 11th of January called Mobilize 2024. And one of the people who's profiled in Anand Giridharadas' book is Anat Shankar-Osorio, who is a master messaging strategist for Democrats and progressives. She is, in fact, our guest in the very first week of this program. In addition to the fact that we have now added in our latest announced guest, Brencia Berry, who is the political director for the DNC. She's going to be with us in the last week of the program. So if you have not yet gotten in, please do so, because one of the things that we're aiming to do is give you guys all the tools that you need from the grassroots straight through to the presidential election over the course of the next 8 weeks to get everybody that you know out to vote, to mobilize in your own community, to make sure that people know what is important in 2024. This is the program that will get you there. So if you have not yet registered, please go do it. Class starts a week from Thursday. Registration closes a week from tomorrow. So you've got not very much longer left to join us. And, I'm going to say also, I know a lot of you are already in it. I see familiar names who are already here, who have already registered. You know who you are. I'm very grateful to all of you for kind of being here and for getting in on that program, because the group that we have on this is incredible. And we also have scholarships and payment plans available for those of you who need that. All right. I want to just note, I don't like to amplify the former guy, but I want to just note one thing about some of the stuff that he's been doing in the last few days and its impact. Okay. For those who are not yet aware, there was an incident at the Colorado Supreme Court this morning where someone went into the Colorado Supreme Court and opened fire on the officers inside the Colorado Supreme Court. That person has now been arrested. They are in custody. But I have to remind everybody that one of the things that happens when Trump's statements on Truth Social are amplified is that we are also amplifying in many instances stochastic terrorism and lone wolf violence. We've also seen a massive uptick in swatting over the last couple of days. For those who don't know, swatting is when somebody calls 911 and claims that there is a violent act underway inside someone's house, that someone is being held hostage, or someone's spouse has been shot, or someone's children are being held hostage, and calls out essentially like the SWAT team, that's why it's called swatting, against someone's location. The unfortunate result of this is often that people get hurt or they get shot themselves by police when they've done nothing wrong. Well, lo and behold, the Secretary of State of Maine was swatted over the weekend. We've also seen journalists like Navid Jamal, I'm gonna mispronounce his name, and I feel so badly about this. Okay, I'm gonna have to Google it. Stay here really quick. But there was a journalist, a very famous ex-military journalist, who was also swatted this weekend as well. I think it's yes, Navid Jamal. There we go. He was swatted this weekend as well. Somebody claimed that he had shot his wife. And part of that is because he has made a number of very strong anti-Trump statements in the last few weeks. So one of the things that is really key here is that we need to be aware that, amplifying Trump leads to lone wolf violence. All right. And that's one of the reasons why I do my very best to never amplify him, because one of the things that the far right counts on is that we are amplifying not just their disinformation, but also their threats. Okay, because one of the things that we can't forget is that the aims of these threats is also to silence people, to make people afraid to vote, to make people afraid to volunteer to be a precinct captain, to make people afraid to go out and do voter mobilization work. Okay, if there's anything that I can plead about, as we head into 2024, it's to please not amplify known disinformation or statements by the former guy without doing it by screenshot, so the person doesn't get the traffic, or without a big red X through it, or something that indicates that it's false. All right. Because the last thing that we want is for our side of the fence to be used to amplify things that are going to depress the turnout in the 2024 election. All right. We also don't want people to be subjected to threats of violence or swatting. So again, I've said this a lot over the last few weeks, but it's on all of us during this election cycle as well to appropriately manage misinformation, disinformation, threats of violence so that we are not part of the problem. All right. That includes, by the way, I have to say it again, because we always have new viewers on this broadcast. Do not engage with people who are very obviously trolls and bots. Do not engage with disinformation. Just block it. Literally, even if it triggers you to high heaven, don't engage with it. Just block. Because the more you engage, even if it's to set somebody's pants on fire, the more you are increasing their amplification, and the more you're increasing the distribution of what they're saying across every algorithm that is in play. All right. Very, very, very important. Again, I want you guys to have strategies going into 2024. These are basic things that you're going to need. All right. Now, all that said, I do want to mention this morning that one of the things that we are seeing from Trump and that we've seen in the last couple of days is that he is having, how do I put this? Extreme struggle, even meeting reality. And this is one of the reasons why he's refused to participate in the debates. It's one of the reasons why so many people who are in the psychiatric professions are currently calling out his decompensation. Many of the things that he's posting right now don't even make sense. And I know he hasn't made sense for some time, but what I mean by that is it's not even in full sentences. All right. So it's not, I amplified something he said on Threads this morning for one purpose and one purpose only, which was to call out the contrast between the values of what Joe Biden stands for and what Trump is saying. Okay. So one of the other few limited exceptions to this are when you are pulling out the values. I'm going to say this again. This is straight Anat Shankar Osorio. The values, the villain, and the vision of the 2024 election. Like, that is a 3-part strategy that Anat is going to talk about at great length inside our Mobilize 2024 program. I'm just giving you guys the tiny little preview. But what you need to know as you head into this is that one of the things that is really problematic about the current information moment is that the winds of the Biden administration are not getting through. This morning, even on the Patreon feed, we had folks talking about the fact that their college-aged kid came home being very anti-Biden, thinking that Biden hadn't done anything. And after a number of conversations and some research, realized that like Biden has actually propelled an enormous number of positive strategies for Gen Z. We're not just talking about like student debt relief. We're talking about things like, yes, infrastructure. Yes, things like lowering the cost of prescription drugs, right? We're talking about other things that are really going to benefit like that generation and every generation going forward, right? The high-speed rail thing is a very big deal. I know it's just transportation, but people win on transportation all the time. So and then of course there's the economy and jobs and things that are really critical for people coming out of college right now. So it's very important that you do not just set up someone as the demonization factor, right? Because people don't know, people I think already know, like if they're remotely in our camp, how bad Trump is, all right? The real key right now to mobilizing voters is the vision and the values that we share, all right? And so it's very, very, very important that one of the things that we do here is amplify the good, all right? And that means finding ways, like, I'm going to tell you all on Threads, the rapid response digital team for the Biden-Harris campaign is on it. Like, they're posting like once an hour, and they are drawing these contrasts all the time between what Biden has stood for and what anybody else in the GOP is doing right now. All right. Things like abortion rights, right? Things like backing unions. Organized labor, very big with Gen Z and millennials and me, frankly. Like, I've been in unions. You all know this, all right? And I think it's very, very critical right now that we stop doing just the thing of, oh my God, the sky is falling, right? And we also do the thing of actually really doing the messaging that Democrats really need right now, of talking about things like Biden bridges and Biden trains and Biden roads and, Biden being pro-abortion rights and pro-trans rights and like LGBTQ rights and like pro-climate progress and like all these things that are incredibly necessary. All right. I'm just going to, it's Biden-Harris HQ is the name of the account on Threads that is the digital response, the rapid response team. Okay. I'm going to mention this really quick because I'm always about amplifying Indivisible tools. Reminder, Leah Greenberg, the co-founder of Indivisible, is also one of our guests in our Mobilize 2024 program. She and I spent a lot of time on this type of strategy and talking about grassroots mobilization in the interview that's going to drop. And she's in week 2. So in any event, you'll hear more about all of this from Indivisible if you join Mobilize 2024 at GaiaLeadershipProject.com/mobilize. All right. But Indivisible does have this new program called Powering Progress, which is literally designed, and this is great, to amplify the wins of the Biden administration. We need more of this. We need more of it. And we need it as a counterbalance right now also to everything that's out there circulating about how, like, you should sit out this election because of, what Biden has done in relation to Israel. I have to say, I'm getting like increasingly fed up with this, notwithstanding the fact that I'm appalled. Like, I always have to say this, I'm appalled by what's happening in Gaza. But like, what people are not actually, there's 2 things that in my opinion, people are not actually grasping. One is that Netanyahu is going to keep going no matter what, okay? And the second thing that I think people aren't grasping here, which is really profoundly critical to all of this, is that the flip side of this is concentration camps in the United States and mass murder of immigrants and trans people. Like, I'm sorry, but like, you've got to have a real clear view of what's coming down the pike. And also about the fact that, all the things that we want in our society are on offer if Biden is reelected. Okay. You think that Netanyahu is going to stop bombing Gaza if Trump is reelected? I got news for you. So all of this is really critical. And I'm just going to say this for the few people here who are like, not paying attention to this or who are dealing with this in the context of their own children, please keep talking to them. All right. Like, don't give up. All right. Because one of the things that's really problematic about this right now is that there is this perception that certain accounts that are saying all of this, like, and I have to say that I'm not going to shout anybody out, but I went and looked at some stuff this morning on Twitter for the first time in a very long time. There are some accounts that are calling for people to sit out the election. Some of them are names that I know. All right. They're also not getting like a massive amount of amplification on Twitter. That tells me that a lot of this stuff is happening on TikTok. And I have to remind you all, that people give me blowback about this every time I say it, but I have to remind you all that there are white supremacist accounts on TikTok and on Twitter that are amplifying this because they want Trump reelected. All right. Like this is not what it looks like. And I hate to put it in those terms, but like, it's really not. Even if a few significant accounts and like more than a handful have at this point fallen for this, people need to understand that there is a massive flavor of a psyop happening right now in relation to all of this that is about formerly white supremacist, anti-Jewish, anti-Muslim accounts amplifying the idea that people should sit out the election and not vote for Joe Biden because of what's happening in Gaza. This is not hard to track, by the way. Like if I can do it in 5 minutes, I guarantee you that your Gen Z kids could figure it out. All that said, it's very, very important to keep working the messaging around this. All right. And like, I have to say it. I also had a long conversation. Here we are at Mobilize 2024 again. This is one of the reasons why I want everybody in this program. I had a long conversation with Santiago Meyer and Victor Shi in their guest interviews in this program about this exact issue. And the point that they made that their polling demonstrates is that Gen Z folks are far more likely to listen to their parents, their teachers, adults they respect, their mentors about these issues than they are about TikTok or anywhere else. Like your voice matters to younger generations. And if you are struggling with your kids falling for disinformation about this, falling for the propaganda that is being put out by white supremacist accounts that is then being adopted by other larger influencers who don't know any better, your obligation to your kids and to democracy and to the election is to be the voice of reason. And I have to say, nobody has to say that Biden's right, okay? But this is one of the things that I want to point out here about all of this, all right? One of the problems that Democrats face always going into a major election cycle is that we expect our candidates to be perfect, okay? No one is perfect, okay? There are things that Joe Biden does that I don't agree with, okay? I'm not particularly pleased about what's happening in Gaza either. Like that's the understatement of the year. But one of the things that I do have is a very nuanced view of where we are. And if you are going to talk to your kids or anybody else that you know about this, you have to have a nuanced view about it as well. All right. Because the end result of not having a nuanced view is concentration camps in the United States, mass murder of immigrants and trans people, no rights for anyone. People like me will be rounded up, right? Anybody who's got a political view who Trump decides he doesn't want is going to be rounded up. And, by the way, I don't think anybody should think it's any different if it's Nikki Haley, because she's got her own like highly suspect anti-immigrant positions, notwithstanding her own family history. So I want people to be really clear. And I'm going to remind you all, if you need an understanding of how to message this, vision, sorry, that's not right. Values, villain, vision. Okay. All of us can agree, right? That everyone deserves to have civil rights. All of us can agree that we need a more peaceful world, right? Who's the person who's driving violence right now? Hate, the rounding up of people on the basis of their skin color, their gender identity, their sexual orientation. Who's the person who's advocating that? That's our villain. All right. And what are we sharing as a vision for the future? The vision for the future is a better nation where democracy survives so that we actually have a chance of doing things on the international stage that will create a greater peace. Right? We push our candidates who are all imperfect in the direction of being better. We don't do that by sitting out elections. So that's my rant about that particular issue for today. All right. I want to talk about just a couple of other minor issues right now that are like, they're not actually all that minor, but I want to remind people that something very significant has happened in Brazil over the weekend. Bolsonaro is now not allowed to run for re-election for the next 10 years. I want people to understand that that's the bare minimum that you should expect when people foment an insurrection. And, I think we're going to be moving, by the way, into that direction in a much greater way, assuming that the 14th Amendment issue gets resolved in front of the Supreme Court. Also, COVID. Okay. I would be remiss if I didn't say this right now. We are in the second largest wave of COVID right now since the pandemic began. There is not a lot of news traffic about this. You have to be following epidemiology Twitter in order to kind of like, or rather threads, in order to actually understand what's happening in the wastewater reporting. All right. I myself know 12 people right now who have COVID, including about 4 people who never had it before. All right. So reminder, put your mask back on, wear it indoors in public spaces with no excuses. Okay. Please do not socialize with people if you are not testing first. All right. I mean, there are great examples of this, but like, you know, a very famous editor-in-chief who I follow on Threads who has been religious about this was one of 18 people who was infected at a holiday party, you know, like just a gathering of friends. All right. So please make sure that you are taking care of yourself, taking care of your loved ones, put your mask back on if you have taken it off. Okay. Last thing, which I just don't really feel like needs any mention, but I'm going to mention it anyway because people ask me about it. Epstein's flight logs have been released. And Donald Trump is on those flight logs a lot. Okay. There are also other names that people will be familiar with. Bill Clinton is on there a couple of times. Am I bothered by this? Honestly, do I think it's like a big dramatic story the way people are making it out? No, not really. Someone asked how some of those names are redacted. Well, the judge who had control of those logs gave a window of time for people to object to having their names released. And some people actually did that. They filed under seal briefs to have their names redacted from the logs, and they were redacted. All right. Do I think that there's any kind of like big drama that's going to result from this? No. I mean, like, I got to remind everybody, there have already been allegations about Donald Trump and minors. There have already been allegations that, you know, Jeffrey Epstein took 14-year-old girls to Mar-a-Lago to meet with Donald Trump. Do I think that anything is going to tag him right now beyond a criminal conviction that sends him to prison? Probably not. All right. So I just don't want anybody to be like, you know, up in arms about this as if it's going to turn into something big. All right. It's not. The reason why people are paying attention to it is because of the usual salacious stuff that happens whenever Jeffrey Epstein's name comes up. So, you know, that's that. I don't really feel the need to kind of comment on it any further. All right. We have until tomorrow for Trump to file his reply brief on the issue of presidential immunity in front of the DC Circuit, which I've now already touched upon. That brief will land, I don't know, sometime by tomorrow afternoon, my time. So early evening at the absolute latest, by tomorrow night, okay, on the East Coast. It's going to be much of what we've already seen. I'm sure that it's going to play on all these ideas that a president is allowed to do whatever they want. I just want to like reiterate a couple of things here though, because and this is like my final point for the day. All right. We're going to see a lot of really outrageous things said in the media, said by Trump, said by his allies, said in the reporting. Rolling Stone has a piece out this morning about all the things that Trump is planning to do at his trial on January 6th, most of which will not be permissible under the federal rules of evidence. I just want people to understand that there is, it's going to get very outrageous, and it's going to get, that maybe is like a theme for the 2024 election, honestly. It's all going to get very outrageous, all right? There are going to be things that happen that are going to horrify you, that are going to be like, this is disgusting. I can't believe this person did it. I can't believe he said that. Our obligation to democracy in 2024 is to not lose focus. It's to not lose focus, okay? I've been talking about extinction bursts on this broadcast for almost 7 years now. I'm going to remind you all, our 7-year anniversary is coming up 25 days from now. That's crazy, right? But I want people to just remember that if you have a moment where you're like, I can't believe this happened. I can't believe he's making this argument. It's so outrageous. And some of you who are regulars here are more prone to that than others. I'll allow you to self-identify, but I know who you are, okay? This is for you especially, okay? He's going to do outrageous things. His team is going to do outrageous things. The GOP is going to do outrageous things. And our job, bar none of it, is to get out the vote. All right. That is my big picture message as we head into 2024. As always, I want to thank all of you for being here. If you have not yet liked this broadcast, please hit that thumbs up. Minimize the chat if you're on a mobile device and hit that thumbs up because it helps with distribution. If you're watching it after the fact, drop me a comment and tell me what your commitment is going to be to do in 2024 to make sure that we save democracy. And I'm going to remind you all one more time, you got 8 days to get in on what I promise you is going to be one of the most significant training programs of 2024 for anybody who's interested in saving democracy and getting out the vote. Mobilize 2024. You can register at GaiaLeadershipProject.com/mobilize. Great group of people in there already. I think we're like running up toward 50 people now, if I'm right, including all of our scholarship recipients, which, by the way, we are deciding on a rolling basis for those of you who have applied. More than a couple of folks have already donated scholarships. I want to thank you for that as well. I hope to see as many of you as possible in there. All right. And I will be here regular time for the rest of the week. You have to stick a pin in Monday because my family is coming to visit over the weekend, and I have not seen my dad or my stepmother in more than a year. So I'm having a debate about whether or not we're going to have a broadcast not a week from today, next Monday. I think I'm probably going to do it, but stay tuned. I'll let you know about that going forward. And let's remember that, we have the capacity to do this. We're going to be able to pull it out, but it's an all hands on deck moment. All right. Much love, everyone. I will catch you all here at regular time tomorrow. And I'm going to go block that troll right now. Bye-bye. See you later. You're banned. And I will catch you all here live tomorrow. Thank you all so much. Bye.